You're listening to episode 78 of Present Moment. Welcome to Present Moment, Mindfulness, Practice, and Science. I'm Ted Meissner. Present Moment is a podcast with interviews, conversations, and roundtable discussions. We speak with mindfulness teachers about their newest findings published in peer-reviewed science journals, teachers about their understanding and methods as they work with students of mindfulness, authors about their books and interests, and we also speak with everyday practitioners. The website presentmomentmindfulness.com has show notes for each episode along with resource materials. Dr. Judson Brewer joins us to speak about eating mindfully with the Eat Right Now app. Chances are today, yesterday, and just about every day of your life, you've eaten. Chances are also good that most of those dining experiences were done while not entirely aware of the process. Like me, you may have been on autopilot for much of the time. So what happens when this thing we do, that we have to do, is done with intention and awareness? Judd Brewer is a psychiatrist and internationally known expert in mindfulness training for addictions, having developed and tested novel mindfulness programs for addictions, including both in-person and application-based treatments. He has also studied the underlying neural mechanisms of mindfulness using standard and real-time fMRI, and is currently translating these findings into clinical use. He has published numerous peer-reviewed articles and book chapters, spoken at international conferences, presented to the U.S. President's Office of National Drug Control Policy, been featured at TEDx, Time Magazine, Forbes, Business Week, NPR, and the BBC, among others. Our guest today is Dr. Judson Brewer. Judd, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you here. Now, some things have changed since you and I last spoke for the podcast. And this is in the interest of full disclosure. I get to work with you now. So let's talk a little bit about that. We're here at the Center for Mindfulness in Shrewsbury, Massachusetts, in the recording booth, and this has been an amazing experience for me. But I want you to say just a little bit for those who haven't listened to the previous episodes about a little bit about your work here at the center.
At the Center for Mindfulness?
Yeah.
Well, I have to say it's much more fun getting to sit next to you and see you and have a face-to-face conversation as compared to the last time. I'm the Director of Research here at the Center for Mindfulness, so I head up a lot of our research efforts. Really briefly, we have two main lines of research. One is around clinical research, where we're studying MBSR, as well as studying some of the digital therapeutics that we've been developing. And then the other line is the neurobiology and the underlying physiology, where we can try to understand how our brains change from meditation.
Which we've seen through the course of many, many studies over the years, that there are neurological changes that occur within the brains, which is fascinating. And glad that we've got folks as smart as you who are studying that, and not with my limited brain studying that, because then we wouldn't learn anything. So what we're here to talk about today is mindful eating. And I want to first ask about what is meant by mindful eating, the way to eat, just the thing.
Yes. It might be able to start with the opposite of mindful eating, which maybe some of us can relate to, mindless eating.
Where did those nachos go?
Right. They were here a second ago, and now they're gone. And I don't have a dog. So I'm guessing a lot of us can relate to the fact where, we might sit down to dinner, or maybe we're reading a book and we've got a bowl of cereal next to us, and suddenly the book is 10 pages farther along and that bowl of cereal is empty. Or we're having a good conversation with somebody at dinner and suddenly we ordered dinner, but we don't remember what we ordered because the food that was in front of us is gone and we don't remember a bit of it. Other examples might be, I see this a lot, mindless eating while driving. So there's a tendency to snack while we're driving or try to get our lunch down in between meetings. So those are some examples of mindless eating, which I think is probably pretty obvious where we're not paying attention when we're eating.
Well, and anytime we're multitasking, our brains just can't really be fully engaged with two different processes at the same time. Computers can do that. We can't.
Yes, we're not set up that way.
So how about mindful eating, the program? Tell us about that.
Sure. So if we look at the different components of what lead to mindless eating, for example, so our brains were probably set up to help us remember where we found nutritious food and how to avoid dangerous food and danger in general. So we can think of mindless eating getting set up almost on a habit mode where, if we learn that when we're sad and we eat something good and we feel better, that, that trigger, the sadness, the behavior, eating something tasty and then feeling better, that reward, that's the habit loop that gets developed. And that can lead to a lot of mindless eating. So we walk around like these zombies that, when I feel sad, I eat cupcakes and then I feel better. And it just happens automatically. So taking that as a framework, we looked at that to see, well, how can we actually help people use those same triggers as a way to trigger paying attention as we eat. So I think of it as the why, the what, and the how of eating. So the why is what triggered us to eat. So whether it was stress or feeling down or a celebration or whatever. The what is the type of food that we reach for. So when we're feeling bad, we don't necessarily reach for lettuce.
Yeah. Broccoli is not my first choice when I'm down.
And then the how we eat is paying attention or not paying attention. So we can break it down that way. And we've developed this digital therapeutic called Eat Right Now, as in eat correctly in the present moment, where we can train people to start paying attention to each of these aspects of eating. So we can pay attention to the why, what that trigger was. We can pay attention to the what we reach for. And most importantly, we can pay attention to how we're eating. Now, it's really interesting. In my clinic, I was pilot testing this out. And I was learning, working with people with binge eating disorder, and I was learning that they had completely lost the ability to differentiate what we call hedonic versus homeostatic hunger. So hedonic meaning eating for pleasure or for stress, and then homeostatic being eating because we're hungry. And so they would say, I was hungry. And I would say, well, how do you know you're hungry? And they would just say, well, because I was. But then when they started to look at that, we could start to help them differentiate the signs of hunger versus stress, because often we walk around divorced from our bodies. And a lot of them in particular, especially those that were obese, really had a lot of shame associated with their bodies. And so would really not try to, would try to live disembodied as much as possible. So of course it was difficult for them to tell the difference between hunger and stress, for example.
And fuels the cycle even more.
Yes. Yeah. The paradox or the irony that, I feel sad, so I eat. And I feel sad because I'm too heavy and now I eat more. So we developed as part of the program this little button called the stress test, which is kind of like a stealth mindfulness exercise. So we say, okay, well, how do you know if you're hungry or stressed or bored? Let's take a quiz. And we say, do you feel restless? Is your stomach empty? Are you having trouble concentrating? And we can actually pull symptoms from the literature and develop this stress test, and which is really a mindfulness test, because you have to pay attention to your body to see if you check this off or check this off. And we can add to it a weighting factor. So if somebody, how much do we count one symptom versus another, because there's overlap between symptoms. So one symptom might be the same for stress and eating. So we need to be able to determine how much importance to give one versus another. So we could say, how long ago did you eat? And if you just ate, that one doesn't count as much for hunger. And if you didn't eat for 6 hours, then that counts more. And then we can give people a recommendation to, let's go through a mindful eating exercise together, or let's use this RAIN exercise to help you recognize, allow that craving to be there, investigate what it feels like, and note what it feels like so you can write it out.
So you've got the app, Eat Right Now app, and you also have an in-person component to this. So tell us about the flipped classroom model, because I know that's a new concept for a lot of us.
Yes, yeah, good question. So the app itself not only provides these in-the-moment tools like the stress test, but provides about 5 to 10 minutes of training every day. So there are videos, there are animations, there are in-the-moment exercises. And so the idea is, so a typical, let's say you're going to high school or college and you would go to class, so you hear a lecture for an hour, and then you get homework that you would do at home. Well, the flipped classroom model is that we're going to take our classroom and we're going to send it home with you, and we're going to take your homework and we're going to bring it to class. So we can use the app, we can use the Eat Right Now app as a way to give people the didactic training at home. They can go do the lectures every day, 5 or 10 minutes.
And on demand as well, so it fits into their schedule.
Absolutely. And they can go back and review them, right? We've had people go through the entire program 4 times because they keep learning more and more each time. So they can do that at home. And then we say, okay, wherever you had questions, wherever you tripped up, wherever you slipped up, wherever you're struggling, bring that to class. And so each week, we've been doing this here at the Center for Mindfulness since spring of 2016. Each week, a group comes in and we say, okay, let's set an agenda. And the agenda is your life. So no set topics, but the same framework is there to help support them as we explore their adventures with eating together.
And you have some practice time in the classroom as well?
A little bit. So we usually start off with a little bit of practice together to help us all ground together. And then at moments, especially topically, so if something comes up that's related to, say, loving kindness or, checking in with our bodies, we'll say, okay, let's take a moment. And we just all practice together for a few minutes.
Yeah. And I would imagine with the classroom setting that once people are in class for their interactive, their engagement part, that there's also the support of community and the connections they're making there. Are you finding that's the case in the classroom?
Yes, that's the beauty of it. So we had developed the Eat Right Now program to have an online community, and the online community is pretty active and supportive as well, which is great. But there's something about, well, let's say, when you and I can sit here and talk to each other and look each other in the eyes. So there's a lot to nonverbal communication. And so we can convey what's actually happening in ways not through words. And in the same way, we can also convey support in ways of just our presence being with people. So the community has turned out, our in-person community has turned out to be a really supportive and nurturing community for each other. They're really a great bunch of folks.
Which again can only help shift the way that cycle is going. Instead of fueling it in a negative direction, you're putting it on the other way. You're going in reverse.
Yes.
With that support. So how has this been going? What have people been saying? What's happening? What kinds of feedback are you getting?
Well, I can say, so we did our first clinical trial with the Eat Right Now program with some collaborators at UCSF, so University of California, San Francisco, led by Ashley Mason, an assistant professor there. So we just wanted to see, does this darn app work? Because there are a gazillion apps out there, and they're not all the same. There are a lot of apps to help people track their weight. There are a lot of apps that help people track what they eat. There are a lot of tracking things, which is interesting because the data haven't come back tremendously positive around that. If you track what you eat, for some people, it's really helpful because it helps them wake up to how much they're eating. But for a lot of people, it doesn't do a whole lot besides cataloging what they're eating. And so this program is pretty different in the sense that we're providing this progressive mindfulness training to help people change their relationship to eating rather than just saying, hey, look, you're eating this. And in that sense, we wanted to test, I say in the introduction video, this is not about weight loss, right? So some people might use this program to lose weight, and that's great, but really we're here to help you change your relationship to eating. So our primary outcome was just to see if we could decouple craving and eating. And by that I mean when we crave, we eat. And with mindfulness training, we'd found with our smoking program that we could help people have cravings come up, work with them without smoking. It would help them quit smoking. So we asked the same question with the eating program. Could people have a craving come up? Could they actively work with it? And in actively working with it, change their relationship and not have that result in an automatic eating pattern. So would they eat less? Would they stop when they're full? And could they actually ride out emotion-related eating cravings, which, as you can see, would, as you're saying, break that cycle. So we collected data. We had about 100 people enroll in the study, and got good data sets from about 3/4 of those folks, and actually found that there's a significant drop in craving-related eating with just the app itself. So we hadn't even really emphasized the community portion. So that was really gratifying. We even threw in as a secondary variable, meaning, well, let's just see if this works or not, but we're not going to pay too much attention to it. Did people actually lose weight? Because we weren't expecting people to lose weight.
It wasn't the main focus of this anyway.
Right. And lo and behold, there was a modest but significant weight loss, at least with the folks that went through the program within 3 months. So that was gratifying as well. And in our in-person group, we're seeing people, really report significant insights around all their eating patterns, and even start to see how this is kind of a doorway in for them to see all of the other habit patterns, all the other habit loops that they kind of live out in addition to eating. So it's really fun to use eating as kind of a pain point, as a doorway in, and then have this be a way for people to get motivated to learn to pay attention. And then they learn, oh, I don't have to stop paying attention when I'm just keep it to eating. I can pay attention when I'm fighting with my partner, or when I'm caught up in this, or when I'm caught up in that.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the smoking cessation program, which we've talked about before, because it's exactly as you're saying. With the eating program, we all eat. And chances are, if you're listening to my voice, you've eaten unmindfully and perhaps experimented with fully being present as you eat, that it stretches into other aspects of our lives, and that it's really based on the same kind of habits that you saw with the smoking program.
Mm-hmm.
Is not surprising, and actually lends itself to, this applies to more than just eating. This is a starting point. This is a doorway, and it's not a duplicitous going to make you mindful for it. It's just this is an added benefit, like going to the gym and exercising. We're not trying to be sneaky about making you stronger and healthier. It's an intentional part of this.
Yeah, and it's one that people, you can try to force mindfulness on people, which doesn't work.
Right.
Or they can discover it on their own terms, and that's the beauty of a program like this, where I use this for eating, and I found that I've discovered, my own wisdom, that this generalizes to other things as well.
Yeah. Now, you also have, as part of this, a facilitator training.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit about that too.
Yes, so we found that the mindful eating program was going pretty well, our flipped classroom, and wanted to offer training especially to some of our MBSR teachers. So there are a lot of certified MBSR teachers out there. There are folks that are in training to become certified teachers. And there are also people who've led or led mindfulness trainings of other sorts. And we wanted to really train people to be able to lead these flipped classrooms all over the world. So we began pilot testing. That's what I do all the time, pilot test. We began pilot testing this last summer with a small cohort of trainees, where we could have them be participant observers in our online community. So I have an online community that I run as part of the app at noon on Wednesdays. And they can join that, and they can observe my facilitation and my co-facilitators, Robin Baudet, she's a psychologist who's worked with eating disorders for 20 years, I think, and is a certified MBSR teacher. So we co-lead this group, and they can participate and they can observe how we're facilitating, and immediately thereafter we can unpack it. We can run the films because they've just seen it, and we can say, okay, what did you notice? What qualities of a teacher did you see or were missing? How would you have answered this differently or the same? And we can really provide some in the moment training there for what we call the step 1 of the facilitator training. And then in step 2, they start running their own groups live, just like my group. They record them, and then they bring their recordings to this group facilitation or this group supervision as well. So they'll play particular segments and ask questions like, oh, I don't know if I did this right, or I think I did this really well. Is that true, or am I deluding myself? So we can go through, it's about a 4-month training process. At least that's the way we have it set up right now. It's all online. It's all through this group interaction through Zoom, this web-based video conferencing. And so far, it seems to be working pretty well.
So if people want to find out more about the program or perhaps about the facilitator training, what's the best way for them to get started?
Great question. So for the app itself, the website is goeatrightnow.com. So you can go to goeatrightnow.com, and it's pretty straightforward. There's a free trial version if somebody wants to play with it for a bit. And then for the facilitator training, somebody can go to the CFM website, and it's listed, I think, under teacher training, under mindful eating. So there's a whole training pathway. We're now accepting applications for our 3rd round, so our 2nd full cohort. And I think we'll begin that training in February of 2017. But the folks that want to be eligible for that will have to have gone through the entire 28 days of the program beforehand. So they'll have to get started within the next month or 2.
And just as a refresher of this understanding that you did share during this, but I want to make sure that folks understand, it's not a diet program. Say a little bit more about that, because I know that
Sure.
is frequently misperceived.
It is not a diet program. It's about changing our relationship to food. So becoming, I'm thinking of one of my patients that I worked with in my clinic who came in. She was binge eating 20 out of 30 days. She would eat an entire piece at a time. She was pretty obese, and came in saying she had no control over eating. And we said, okay, let's see if we can work with it. And we worked with it quite a bit. And by the end, she said, I can eat a single piece of pizza mindfully and enjoy it. And she said, I've got my life back. Now, she did lose 40 pounds, but the point was she lost it because she wasn't binge eating on a whole pizza 20 out of 30 days. She was not binge eating at all and was eating single pieces of pizza. So that's really what this is about, it's about not being out of control.
Mm-hmm. So one other thing I did want to mention just as a teaser is you also have a book.
Oh, right.
So we're going to do an entirely separate interview about that for folks who are listening, but I did want to just get that mentioned to whet the appetite. Not that you should binge read this book, but you should mindfully consider that we're going to do another talk about it, say more about it.
Yeah, and you can't binge read it right now because it's only available for pre-sale on Amazon. Though I think they do try to entice people. They've made it like 30% off right now or something. It's called The Craving Mind, From Cigarettes to Smartphones to Love, Why We Get Hooked and How We Can Break Bad Habits. And it really uses a bunch of different examples about how, this habit loop that we've been talking about, how we can get hooked in all different manners and walks of life. And importantly, all of the research that I've done and some of my own clinical work and some of my own personal practice, how all of that can come together to help us change our relationship to all of these things.
Awesome. Our guest today, Judd Brewer. If you want to find out more, I'll be having links to goeatrightnow.com as well as the training on the CFM website for Eat Right Now. Thanks for being here.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to learn more about something you've heard in today's podcast, please come visit the website at presentmomentmindfulness.com. You'll find an entire webpage devoted to this and every episode. You can comment on the episode page and find show notes and other helpful resources for your mindfulness practice. The shakuhachi music heard on Present Moment is used by permission and through the generosity of musician Rodrigo Rodriguez. His website is linked on the Present Moment website on the About Podcast Music page. Sound editing, mixing, and mastering provided by the generosity of Anthony Dominello of StructureFromSound.com. Until next time, remember, every moment you have a choice. Make it the best you can. See you next time on Present Moment.